Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Enemy Within, which is episode 5 of season 1 of Star Trek The Original Series. This video is a part of a series of videos where I cover every episode of Star Trek The Original Series, one episode at a time. In this video, I will cover The Enemy Within. So The Enemy Within is the episode in which, due to a transporter accident, Kirk is split into two halves, good half, bad half, and in the meanwhile there's a group of people, including Sulu, who are trapped on the planet, who is encountering a nighttime that's so freezing cold that they could die, yet they can't use the transporter because it's still malfunctioning, and so they have to solve the issues with the transporter while trying to find the bad Kirk. But eventually the good Kirk convinces the bad Kirk to go on the transporter, and they manage to fix it and beam the wayward crew up to save their lives. So this is one of those here. It's a kidding. Anyway, this is one of those weird concept episodes that are kind of like, it's one of the ones that stood out to me when I was first getting into the original series. Like, before I even saw this, like, I was aware that there was an episode where they went to a parallel universe. There was an episode where they all got old. There was an episode where there was a bunch of tribbles around. And there was an episode where they went into a western. And then there was an episode where Kirk got split into two halves, the good half and the bad half. So I think it's notable and sort of memorable for that meaning. Now, I will say, when I was younger, when I was like 12 or 13, when I first started watching this, I liked this episode. This was one of my, I wouldn't say favorite episodes, but I put it up as one of the better ones. But as I got older, I could see a lot of issues with it. And so now I don't think very highly of it. Now, it's funny, I remember someone when I was younger trying to recount this episode, like they were like giving, it was like a teacher or whatever giving a speech about trying to make a point, and it was like, oh, it's like that Star Trek episode where Kirk got split into two halves, and the students thought he was talking about Mirror Mirror, and they were like, isn't that like a parallel universe? And the teacher was confused because he didn't know enough about Star Trek to realize these are two different episodes. I did, but I didn't give a shit about the class, so I didn't say anything. Let them be confused. Those amateur Star Trek watchers think they know Star Trek, but they don't. But anyway, so that is the basic concept of the episode, and I actually don't really have an issue with that concept of having two different people. You know, it's speaks to how the inner turmoil in oneself, that really there are, I wouldn't say just even two halves, but there's like multiple sides to everyone, multiple different facets, and if you remove them, even the so-called bad side of it, then you're not you anymore, and you actually need that bad side. Ironically, this is also the point of the Pixar film Inside Out, which wasn't focused so much on the sort of evil thoughts one has, but more of the sad thoughts, where, spoilers for Inside Out, the point of that movie was that, they were trying to get rid of sadness, but without sadness, the girl couldn't cope or whatever, that she couldn't, she felt empty and directionless, so she needed that sadness. Which is a much better movie, by the way, much better story than this one. Whereas the point of this is that, you think that the good Kirk was unable to command or make decisions and was being ineffective as a captain because he needed that sort of dark side of him to sort of drive and save lives and do the right thing. Which, okay, I can buy that, I guess, but it does make it very, as I said, this episode puts it more in a dichotomy where good versus evil side, where your inner thoughts or different aspects to oneself is much more complex than just being shoved into two sides, good and evil. Besides which, it does make the transporter seem to be a sort of magical fantasy device. All you have to do is add some pixie dust, and all of a sudden it can split people into two, good versus evil. It doesn't actually make any sense. And then they had the dog. Oh god, the dog. Now, I talked about when I was 12 and I kind of liked this episode, but when I was like 14, 15, I used to hang out with a bunch of friends and get stoned all the time, and it just so happened that the original series at the time, which I had seen every episode dozens of times by this point, but the original series at the time was coming on at 2 in the morning, so we'd still be up, high, and we turn on the original series to make fun of it, and we only did a couple times, but this is the one time when we had the most fun. Watching this episode, just how ridiculous it is, and how there's a dog that's clearly a dog. Now, before I said it was a Cocker Spaniel, I'm looking at it now, I'm not so sure it's a Cocker Spaniel, but it's definitely a dog. It is very noticeably, very obviously a dog that they just put, like, this costume, like, horns on it, and, like, there's other horns on the back, and the crew members go up to them, look, Captain, we found this strange animal. I'm like, it's a dog! I was just waiting for it to bark. You go, woof, woof. Oh my god, it was so cheesy. And anyway, the dog gets split into half, and then the evil half was just like, growling and being obviously a dog. Going, grrr. Anyway, and the other thing that was a lot of fun to watch this episode is the end fight where Kirk fights himself, where one of the Kirks is very obviously a stunt double. That was hilarious. But anyway, the original series. But that's low-hanging fruit for the original series, to be fair, and it has more to do with the 60s and the budget and all that kind of thing. So that's not really the issues I have with this episode. One of the issues, which I'll get into now, is William Shatner. Now, as I alluded to with my intro, goddamn, he fucking hammed this up. Now, I've read a couple of reviews before making this review, and all of them, like, there were interviews with, like, people involved with the episode, like the director, the writer, and I think even another actor praised William Shatner's performance in this episode. I'm like, really? Like, what are you smoking? But my favorite is apparently a quote from James Doohan, who said that William Shatner's performance in this episode was very okay. I think that was kind of the slide way of saying that it sucked. Because it did! Now, to be fair, as the good captain, the good version of Kirk, he actually gave a decent performance. I wouldn't say it's a great performance, but it's decent. He accurately portrayed someone who was like kind of weak and confused. So that was good. But the evil Kirk, boy, man, was he chewing up that scenery and eating some ham. That was, yeah, that was extremely over the top, and I used to always show that clip back when I used to be able to use clips, or I thought I could use clips without getting my videos fucking demonetized and taken down. But I used to always show that clip whenever I mentioned Kirk's overacting. I would always show the clip of Kirk going, "I'm Captain Kirk!" from that episode, because that's the key. That is the key moment of overacting that is representative of all the overham acting that Shatner did throughout the show. That's like one of the worst examples, but by far not the only one. But it's one of the easiest ones. It's so dumb. And even not just that line, but the whole way he was playing evil Captain Kirk is like, and then later he was like, "I want to live!" Now, let me bring up an infamous Voyager episode, one that's infamous in my eyes because I absolutely hate it, and I think it's one of the worst episodes of Voyager. In fact, one of the worst episodes of all of Star Trek, and a lot of people like it and think it's one of the best episodes of Star Trek, and that is fucking Tuvix. Now, in Tuvix, my if you see, I'm not going to get into all of this. If you've seen the episode, you know what I'm talking about. My thesis for Tuvix is the character's acting like, it was a combination of Tuvok and Neelix from a transporter accident. So this is like the proto of that. That episode is kind of like a different version of this one, because this one also involved a transporter accident, but it was one person getting split into two, where that episode is two people getting combined into one. That episode, Tuvix acts like when Janeway finds a way to separate Tuvix again into Tuvok and Neelix, Tuvix acts like he's killing him and goes around saying, "I want to live!" Now, I said this a lot. Every single time I talk about Tuvix, I always say, "I want to live!" But he actually doesn't say it exactly like that. He says it more like something more like, "I deserve the right to live. You can't just kill me." He never flat out says, "I want to live." I don't think so, anyway. But I think actually I picked it up from this episode when Evil Kirk goes, "I want to live! I want to live!" So I actually think I've been misquoting this episode, Enemy Within, rather than Tuvix. But getting back to the Tuvix comparison, because it's interesting to think about. So my thesis on that episode is that the writers tried to play it, to present the scenario that something it was not. And oftentimes, everyone who looks back on this episode, and there's so many videos and essays about, how Janeway killed Tuvix, but I actually don't think she did, because I don't think Tuvix died. I don't think he was killed. I think that he was a different version of Tuvok and Neelix, who was reverted back to the original version, which is the two different forms. Now, I got a lot of pushback on my video from people who were objectively wrong, and I still see like other videos where like, Tuvix, she murdered Tuvix. There's no argument about that. Actually, you're wrong. You're objectively wrong. That wasn't murder, because he wasn't fucking alive. He was Tuvok and Neelix. If Tuvix was murdered, where's his body? Or you can say, not every time there's a body. Well, if they're died in a fire, there's ashes. Even if they're killed by phasers, there's remnants. Where are those? Where are they? They don't exist because his entire being himself are in Tuvok and Neelix, because he's just a different version of fucking Tuvok and Neelix. He's not dead. And Tuvok and Neelix were never dead either, because they were actually alive in Tuvix. Now, why am I rehashing it in this episode? Because this episode proves my point. Because when it's a similar situation, as I said, instead of two people getting combined into one, it's one person getting split into two. But still, at the end of the episode, when Evil Kirk goes, "I will live," they don't know. None of the crew treat it as if they're killing Evil Kirk. There's no essays about how Spock and Good Kirk killed Evil Kirk, like they say that Janeway killed Tuvix. Why aren't you saying they murdered Evil Kirk in cold blood? Because they didn't, because he was just combined back into Kirk. Just like Good Kirk didn't die either. He was combined back with it, and they became a different version of themselves, just like Tuvix was separated. So it's the opposite effect, but same idea. Separated into two separate beings, Tuvok and Neelix, which they were the entire time. Never died, just a different form. Just like Evil Kirk, it's not like Kirk died and became Evil Kirk and Good Kirk, and then they killed Evil Kirk and Good Kirk. No, they were just in different forms, and they put them back into form. Same idea with Tuvix. I'm so perplexed why this is such a hard concept for many people to grasp. But anyway, I just had to throw in my Tuvix talking, because this reminded me of it, especially that "I want to live" line. Now, let's get into the other aspect of this episode that is why I don't like it, and it's actually the bigger aspect. It's the bigger point of what I hold against this episode, is the way they deal with sexual violence and rape in this episode. So Evil Kirk, we see him beam back up to the ship, and the first thing he wants to do is the first thing he does is get really drunk, because only evil people drink. And he's like, "Give me the brandy!" Kirk's overactive, Shatner's overactive. Anyway, The second thing he does is goes to Yeoman Rand's quarters and try to rape her, and really try to force himself on her and saying that's what she always wanted. And then this other crewman comes by and stops him, and he attacks him and runs off. And so that's bad enough. They're trying to portray him as evil, the evil Kirk, but it seems like that's too much of an easy go to. Ooh, he has to. It's kind of implying that Kirk has a side of himself that cannot control himself around women, which, again, this is, yeah. But anyway, that's kind of excusable, but that's bad enough in itself. But what they do next is what makes it really worse. How they force Rand, when she reports this to someone about what happened, how she was sexually assaulted, they make her go to the person who she's accusing of sexually assault her, and they make her tell Kirk, and Kirk, Spock, and McCoy pretty much all gaslight her and try to make her act like she's crazy and she doesn't know what she's talking about, and then it clearly couldn't be him because I got no scratches on my face. Your story doesn't match up, and yeah, there's something really, really fucking wrong about that scene. And then later, when they find out that there was an evil Kirk that did assault her, they don't make any attempt to apologize to her or anything like that. But what happens at the end of the episode is what I find most disgusting. In fact, apparently Grace Lee Whitney, who played Yeoman Rand, wrote about this in her memoirs, that she actually liked this episode except for this final scene, which she thought was absolutely despicable, which I agree. Was when Spock, of all people, goes to Rand and says, "Oh, so that imposter, that dark evil Kirk, did have some qualities that you appreciated. Isn't that right, Yeoman? Wouldn't you say, Yeoman?" And then he kind of just leers at her as she walks away. And I'm like, what the actual fuck? I'm actually, and I think, and I hear the excuse, oh, it's the 60s, Mark, the 60s was a different time, you gotta allow that. That's bullshit. Honestly, I don't think this shit would be acceptable even in the 60s. I'm actually surprised that Leonard Nimoy actually agreed to read the line that way. That's all kinds of wrong, and I don't even know if I even need to explain that. How wrong, how fucked up that is, saying that because at this point they know it was the evil Kirk that sexually assaulted her. They know that she wasn't lying and making it up, but he's kind of saying, "Oh, so you were into it, weren't you? Yeah, you were. Don't tell me you weren't." What the actual? That's what he's fucking saying. I don't know. I refuse to believe that this was the common view on sexual assault in the 60s. Maybe I'm being naive. I wasn't alive in the 60s. But, oh my God. Anyway, so mainly that final scene is what really tears this whole episode down for me. I can't really consider this a good episode because that's fucked up. That is really fucked up. Now, trying to look past that and see what I do like about the episode. I do like the scenario of people being trapped on the planet and Kirk losing his ability to make decisions because he's not whole. And I like how they deal with it, how he realizes that he's not whole and he needs to be whole. And Spock is there to back him up. That is an interesting concept, and I do like the way they play it. Now, speaking of the people trapped on the planet, this is the most easily solved plot hole, I think, in all of Star Trek. And this, of course, is looking at in retrospect. Send the shuttlecraft down and save them, bring them back to the ship that way. Now, of course, the obvious answer to that is this is episode 5, and they hadn't come up with the idea that shuttlecrafts even exist yet at this point in the show. But my counter to that would be, it doesn't make any sense for them not to have any alternate means of transportation, that their whole, and especially since it's been established in this version of the Enterprise, there's only one transporter room. So you tell me they're beaming down to these alien planets that could have hostile environments, viruses and stuff that they don't even know, and their only means of getting back from that planet is this one piece of equipment, and if it malfunctions, they're just fucked. That is a shitty way to operate, and I don't buy any ship in any organization as organized and efficient as Starfleet is portrayed to be would operate in that manner. Of course they would have an alternate means of transportation. Of course they wouldn't be solely dependent on that one piece of technology. So it doesn't matter that they haven't come up with shuttlecraft yet at this stage. That just is a stupid idea and still portrays them as incompetent, that they don't have any other way to get these people up from the planet. Now, I grant you, if this was like TNG or Voyager or something like that, they would just come up with some technobabble nonsense to make it so shuttlecraft couldn't operate. Oh, there's an atmospheric barrier that takes down shuttlecrafts, or shuttlecrafts can't fly in this. I think there were episodes where they've done that before, where the people were trapped on the planet, so they just come up with a bullshit excuse of why they couldn't use shuttlecraft. But this is before they didn't really think it through in that manner. So so then, even though I liked the subplot of Sulu being trapped on the planet, I thought it was interesting. It's one of the easiest solvable plot holes in the entirety of Star Trek. And the excuse that you hadn't come up with a shuttlecraft yet doesn't fly. Just like the shuttlecraft that should have rescued Sulu, it didn't fly. Anyway, my rating for The Enemy Within out of 10 is going to be a 4. Poor. And I gotta be honest, if it wasn't for, especially that final scene with Spock, but if it wasn't for the sexual assault plot with Rand, I'd probably give this episode a 6, possibly even a 7. I don't know. Shatner's ham, and using the dog. It's clearly a dog. Might bring it down, prevent it from being a 7, and might not get higher than a 6. But yeah, that whole thing with Rand brings it down to bad territory. This is a bad episode because of it, and I can't look past it. In fact, I think I'm being generous by giving it a 4. Really, I should take it down to a 3, and I think sometimes when I rated this episode before I had, but I'm feeling generous today. I'll give this episode a 4. Poor. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those concept episodes, and apparently a lot of people do like this episode, but it has its issues. So anyway, that is it for my review of The Enemy Within. Now, keeping with the tradition of this new tradition of what I'm doing now, I want to give a shout out, a big thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon. And now's the time when I try very hard not to butcher your names. I still haven't released any of these videos as of the recording of this video, so no one's pointed out to me how terribly I'm mispronouncing their names yet, but I'm sure it's coming. Anyway, there's Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Avals, Brian A., Asandro Michalasio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, Allison Fordyce, Brendan Howells. Thank you so much for all of your support on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It really helps me going, and it helps the channel grow. And I just ever thankful for that. And if you would like to support me on Patreon, would be super appreciate it. You have early access to videos like this, and exclusive access to my revisited series where I revisit episode reviews I had already made and talk about the episode a bit more, maybe change my mind on the episode, or maybe get into some detail that I had forgotten to get to before. And other perks, like if you do the higher tier, you can request a video for me to do. So there you go. So let me just check the old schedule here. I believe next Monday I'll be back with another new review for The Man Trap. Yeah, not the first episode. Obviously, even though they aired it wrong. But yeah, that will be my next review as Man Trap. And then next week I'll be, covering Prodigy, and then actually going to be covering Star Wars Andor as well. So the Man Trap, unfortunately, will be the only original series review I will be doing next week, but I shall return the following week with more. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. And if finding me for the first time, be sure to check out my channel, as I do many more Star Trek reviews and other shows like Prodigy and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.